Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Real Talk, Real Leaders. I'm your host, Shauna Griffiths, and I am super excited for today's recording, for today's episode. I talk a lot about using your voice and finding your voice. I talk about a lot of in general, but also on these shows. And I mean it from a personal standpoint, but also in business. And today our guest is someone who is, I swear, a beacon of using her voice. And she's someone that I was able to work side by side with. And she's been an absolute gem in my own evolution and has had a huge impact on me. So without further ado, Lisa Hyman, thank you so much for joining today.
Thank you for having me, Shauna. Always fun to talk to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So Lisa, you have had such incredible journey evolution as I talk about it. And I think one of the things I love about it is how much you have evolved yourself, as I've observed. And, as I know of your history, I know you worked in the WNBA in the inception of the league. So talk about impact. You had various roles there. You worked at IMG, a perennial agency, global agency, and had various roles there. You and I worked at an agency together, and now you're the co-owner of goodDog, and very much focusing on brand strategy for brands that are doing good. So what a journey. Congratulations, first of all. And tell us about that evolution. What's it been like? What's been your North Star?
So I think when I look back on how I got here from there, and when I think about what I thought I might do when I left college, which no one in a million years would have ever pegged me to be working in the agency world, first of all, and also be working in any I don't think anyone thought I'd be in the business world. Frankly, I was an English major, an American studies major, classic. I thought I was a writing person, a communicator. And I think when I look back on where I landed, I think a lot of people who go to liberal arts universities don't have a professional identity in mind when they graduate. They have interests and they have passions and they have skills, but they don't necessarily know how to channel those or direct those in a professional manner. And so I started actually as a journalist. And I think what I've done all these years is just follow my nose to places that have felt like they utilize what I'm good at.
Yeah.
Now, in the beginning, I don't think I knew what I was good at. Other people were telling me what I was good at, which I think happens to a lot of us. Someone pegs you for this or that and then decides for you that you're going to be a that. And so for me, I just, at every juncture, which you're right, has been totally circuitous in a way. I mean, it's really meandered into the digital world, and I was a literary agent, and I was in business development doing the digitization of content for a long time. And then I left the internet and went into marketing, and then I was in communications, and then I was in brand strategy. And so it looks, if I say that way, it's extremely circuitous. But when I think back on where I started and where I am now, there is a narrative that I didn't realize until much later in my career that was in me all the time. And that was, I've always been a storyteller. I've always been interested in stories. I've always been able to connect the dots between disparate things to find the core narrative. And that's true for myself too. I think I was all along connecting dots. And it wasn't until I got a little distance from those dots that I could see that there was a connection between all of those things.
Yeah, absolutely. Isn't it funny when you think back to, I don't know, I think you had this too, but like the frustration we felt along the way, like, what is my next thing? I want that next thing now.
Yeah.
But it's so funny sometimes when we look back, it's like, oh, the dots do connect. You can look actually and see that your path that's got you here, you can kind of see the stones.
Totally. And I've talked to a lot of something that happens with age is people like to ask your advice about things more often. And I've had a lot of conversations lately with recent college grads who are really feeling this kind of uncertainty about what am I supposed to do with my life. And I with distance, I can now honestly say that I think what I've learned from all of this is to really just focus on two things. One is what you like to do and what you're good at.
Yeah.
And try to pursue any job. It really keep your mind open about what the end game is there, because it could lead you into really interesting places. As you said, I would never have thought that my interest in writing and content development, which wasn't a job when I got out of college, could lead to being part of the launch team for the WNBA. They needed someone who knew how to write and knew how to build a content plan. And so I ended up finding myself at a young age running WNBA.com. And it was just because I had an interest in sports. I had worked in sports. I had written about sports. I had experience with building content plans. And so raising your hand and saying, I think I can do this, even though no one had a resume for that kind of job at that time. It was just, I put the pieces together and I made a story for myself about what I was good at, what I was passionate about, where my experience might help guide my professional evolution. So that's the counsel I keep giving people, is stop worrying about the job and start thinking about what do you have to contribute?
Right.
You know, and what story can you tell about all the things that you've done and all the things that you are that are relevant to that thing that you think is interesting, you know, that you want to try.
Absolutely. And it's interesting, you know, like the full circle kind of concept, because now in goodDog, you are in a position where you're working with brands that are actually doing good, making an impact as they're going forward. And it's kind of funny when you talk about your first job or your job at the WNBA, you probably didn't know it at the time, but it was a part of doing good and a part of creating.
Totally. And I think to your point, when I have, now that I have some distance on all of this, when I look back and when I found myself at a moment when I was leaving my last agency where you and I worked together, what did I want to do? And you and I have talked about this a lot. Like, what did I want to do? What was sort of next for me? I found myself looking back at all the things I had done and saying to myself, well, what did I like about those experiences, and what was I good at in all of those things, and how can I put together a job for myself that honors the things I'm good at and exercises some new muscles and does not touch the things that I did not like. And, you know, obviously we all have to do things we don't like in our work from time to time. And I definitely have those in this world too. But when I look back on those very first experiences, that initial, you know, I worked at a magazine and then I worked at the WNBA, and at the WNBA, I had this aha moment that when I think back on it, of like, I really felt like, even though what I did on a day-to-day basis was very specific, I was making a website and I was, you know, carrying a beeper, which really dates me, but I was carrying a beeper and I was like fixing box scores. There was a very specific experience to that job. But what I loved about it was sitting in that arena and looking around and seeing the impact I was making on young girls and young women who had never seen themselves in that arena before. And the relationships, you know, I was, you know, moved all the time seeing a dad and his daughter in the arena sharing a game together, and they weren't watching men, but they were watching who that young girl could become. And that experience of feeling like you were really changing someone's worldview through your daily work was so moving to me. That was one thing. And then the second thing was the launch team, with the exclusion of just a few people, 3 or 4 people, was almost exclusively women. And it was a very rare, it is a very rare experience, even still, to be in a room with decision makers that are mostly women. And I never forgot that, how powerful that was. And so I think fast forwarding 20 years more, I feel like I wanted to replicate, I wanted to live in that type of experience instead of just visit it. You know, which I was doing for the next, you know, after I left there, for the next 15 years of my life, I was really a visitor in those areas. And I just wanted to live there all the time. And so goodDog is a representation of wanting to lead with people that I feel have the same point of view that I do about making the world better with everything that you put out there,
Mhm.
and with companies that maybe aren't always doing things perfectly, but their ambition and their kind of core values are that they really want to leave the world better
Mhm.
with the work that they do and live in that like I do.
Yeah, that's incredible. And it's a great segue because I was going to ask you, like, tell us what you all are doing with goodDog and where you're focusing, and just give us a kind of a look inside.
Well, just like people, businesses often don't know exactly which way to point themselves. And just like people, what the truth is that that story, that kind of core, what they should be, is somewhere inside them. And so, what goodDog does is help companies extract that story from what is really inside them already. So, it
Yeah.
means being good listeners, it means being good fact finders, it means being able to connect the dots between what looks like pieces of information that aren't necessarily connected, and to put together a narrative for that company that drives not just how they tell that story to the world in marketing activities, but also how they tell that story internally. And so that means how their executive team makes decisions. So just because you're telling a story externally in a certain way with certain words doesn't mean that the core of that story shouldn't be governing what you make, what your innovation pipeline looks like, what your sales strategy looks like, how your executives are making decisions about what to do on a daily basis. So how you manage your employees. So the story you tell externally should match the story you're living by internally. So we really help brands find that story. You're right, it is a perfect segue because it's perfectly connected to the way we all should kind of view our lives. There's a story inside ourselves about ourselves that it takes time to find. And once you find it, you want to live in it. Not
Yeah.
just the way you present yourself to the world, but the way you live it on your own in your own day-to-day life. And so we help companies do that. And we do it with companies pretty much exclusively that are mission driven. And not just because it's easier to help them find that kind of authentic story, but also because, frankly, for me, as we were just talking about, I want to spend my time. Now I know, and I figured this out about 10 years ago, that I really want to spend all of my time working with people who are purposed towards doing good in the world.
Yeah. And I mean, couldn't be a better time to have more of this. So one, thank you for the work that you're doing. I mean, and it's so true. We were talking about how you have evolved and how you use your voice for yourself, right? To impact yourself and impact others. And it's really interesting because I think I also talk a lot about patience, because these are lessons that I have learned using a voice and having patience are hard lessons that I've really learned in my journey. And you had to have patience in your own journey to be able to develop your voice stronger for yourself and for others. And so, it really is this thing that can come where now you can do that for brands and the people at the brands. And it really is an ecosystem. I don't think it works to separate them and only be able to do one, because then you're not really being authentic about it, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's true. I also think, well, first of all, I think they go together, patience and voice. I mean, I think I've always had, and I suspect you have too, a strong sense of myself.
Yes.
However, I don't think I always felt like I had permission, even if I was taking the floor
Right.
and offering my voice. I don't feel like it was always welcome. And I think some of that is being a woman in the world. And I'm in my 40s. And so I came of age, when there weren't very many women working in sports, and there weren't very many women at the top of the food chain. There still aren't that many, way more now. But at the time, I often found myself being the only person in the room, and being a young woman who looked young. It was hard to kind of find you could say what you wanted to say, but it was hard to find a welcome, like a receptive audience. And I think the ground has gotten much more fertile for women.
Mhm.
And I think I also realized that there are always going to be environments that are not going to be conducive to hearing strong voices from strong women. And those are not the places where you want to spend your time.
Mm-mm.
You know, just like I said, you want to live in the places. Doesn't mean you don't want to make change where you can. And that's why I think I found this most wonderful, beautiful balance where I get to use my voice, but I'm working with companies, yes, that need whatever help we can provide, but I'm doing it with people who are receptive and leaning forward towards whoever has experience and insight that can help them, not just the one who looks like the package that they imagine has the authority to deliver that. So you have to pick your places, and you can't expect every room to welcome you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an interesting thing, like, you know, finding your voice. I think that I didn't even realize it was a thing. I think I was just like being me, you know, like doing my thing and not really thinking about if my voice was wanted or not, or I was just kind of doing my thing. And I think, but there came a time when I think that my own kind of feeling stunted in being able to exercise my voice, it was that permission thing that I didn't know what it was. And so again, these are kind of things that, again, I'm like you, I'm in my 40s. So I came up during a time, you know, same time as you. And so I don't think that people were talking about it as much. And so I think it's part of the beauty of the conversation that goes on so much now, because my hope is that people can, you know, identify some of these blockers along the way. But, you know, I think, and I have to say, you know, being able to work with and around you, I said it earlier, like you were a beacon for me in the way of watching you use your voice, pick and choose when you used your voice. And it's funny, I don't know if I ever told you this, but there's so many times I think like, what would Lisa do? And if I can't come up with that, I call you, Lisa, help. You know,
yeah.
And so, you know, just like, thank you for sharing that and kind of like your journey in the finding of the voice. And when it wavers, what do you do to help yourself kind of like find your boots?
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes back to remembering what you have to offer.
Mm.
You know, I think one of the things I've learned as I've grown and matured myself as a participant in the world is, and trying to develop my leadership skills, is knowing that there's a time to shut up and there's a time to talk. And also I think there's a time to leave, you know, and I think that's a very hard lesson. And you and I have talked about this a lot. I think women in particular are just grateful for the opportunity sometimes when we should be expecting the opportunity. We've earned the opportunity, and we kind of sit around saying, oh my God, we're so lucky to be in this room. We're so lucky to be in this room. And we forget that we've earned the spot in that room. And this isn't just true for women. I think this is true for everybody, that you put in the time, and if you put in the work, and you develop your expertise, and you develop great knowledge that is helpful to people, that you aren't just hoping, it's not just a hoping for someone to listen to you. It's that it's actually helpful to people if you share what you know. And so when that room that you're in is not interested in what you have to offer, it's time to go. It's time to go. You know?
It's time to go. And it's, yeah, it's time to go. It is, sometimes it can be a really difficult,
so hard to go.
So hard.
Especially if it's been a place you've been for a while. And so, and I don't just look at this selfishly. I think of this as like, I'm just taking up space here. If I'm not valuable to you, if what I have to offer isn't useful to your business, then someone else should be sitting in my seat that is. Right. And so there's someplace else on earth that is going to be a better fit. There's someplace else on earth that could use what it's sort of thinking of yourself as being in service of others. what do I have to offer? And this goes right back to the beginning. What do I have to offer? What am I good at? What am I, how can I be helpful? And finding a place that's leaning forward towards the things that you have to offer. And that's a marriage made in heaven, right? Because then they really need what you have, and you have what they need. And then it's not hard to use your voice because it's just natural, because people are asking for what you have as opposed to fighting so hard to be heard. Yeah. And that's like running into a brick wall every morning, and that's not good for anybody.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It is such a journey to go through that entire process. And I'm so glad we're talking about it. And it's funny because what you said about it's when you do find it, it's a perfect match. And I think that it's really helpful to give ourselves this forgiveness and permission to try different things. And if a perfect match doesn't come along all the time. And so you may be in a place where you're like, oh, this isn't a perfect match, and it is okay. And we can go find something else. And so I think, sometimes people talk about like lifers at a job, right? Or they talk about job hoppers, and it's an interesting thing, those labels. But the most important thing is what you were just talking about, is figuring out, is this the right place for me now? And if it's not, then that is okay. It's actually great.
Yes. Sometimes it's good for everybody to move along. And also, by the way, I think there's a lot of parallels between a business looking for its consumer and a person looking for their professional home. Businesses are constantly saying, I want to be friends with everybody. I want everyone to buy what I'm selling. And it's okay you have something to offer. And you have to find the right fit for what you have to offer, rather than trying to force what you offer onto people that don't really want it.
Right.
And so I think it's a lot more natural for, to market a business to the right consumer, just like it is to kind of pursue a position that is really in line with the things you can offer that business. And then when you're walking in to sell yourself to that company, you really aren't making it up.
Right.
You're actually saying, like, I can see this about your business. These are the things that you could be better at, and here are the ways that I can help you be better at that. So it feels really natural. And you feel very justified in speaking up, and comfortable and confident about speaking up, because you're not spinning a tale.
Right.
You're just telling the truth.
You just stand in your strength. Absolutely. Absolutely. And so as I'm glad you brought it back to that, because I would love to know, in the time we have left, some things about what you're seeing out there. So during this crazy time when we need more than ever brands to be mission driven, I think, internally and externally. A couple different questions that you can answer what you want to, but if there was a wake up call that you're seeing now more than ever, what would that be? And they're probably connected. What are some of the trends that you're seeing in your space?
I think, some of the things that I'm seeing that I wish businesses would understand, and it goes back to what I was just saying, is that you don't have to be, it's just like being a person. You're not for everyone. You're not going to be best friends with everybody. Nobody expects that, right? To walk into a room and connect with every single person in the room. We know when we walk into a social environment that there will be a couple of people in that room that we can have really great conversations with, and everybody else will probably forget us, and we'll probably forget them. Businesses are the same. You can build a business on the back of really deep and meaningful connections with people. If you look at businesses like, that have built really strong, passionate consumer bases, they're the ones that are in the zeitgeist. They're the ones that every other business wants to be, a business like a Yeti or a business like a Patagonia. Those are businesses that know who they are. They know who their target audience is. They know what story they want to tell. They're authentic about it. They're truthful about it. They know their voice, and they walk into every room as themselves. Mm-hmm. And they don't try to be something else. And they don't try to have a empty conversation with someone that's not right for them, they just look around the room and say, these are the 6 people that are right for me. And I'm going to build I'm going to have a meaningful dialogue with those people. And those people are then going to go out into the world and talk about my business because they actually care about it. They feel connected to it. And so I think businesses spend a lot of time and money trying to win friends that were never going to be friends ever. They might buy something once, but they're not coming back. And you cannot build a business on the back of the person you have a 2-second conversation with, but you can on the people that are really meant for you. So if I have one observation about companies or kind of thing I wish that all companies would do, is to spend some time thinking about what that person looks like and what makes them tick and where the connections are between what you offer and what they want. And then work on those and build your business around them and make things for them. When you're thinking about what else to make things for them, because they're going to tell the world about how wonderful you are. And they have friends that are just like them. So they're going to drive their business for you. So that's probably the main kind of insight that I have. And then I think the only other, and this is kind of a different rabbit hole, but I'll just throw it out there, is today's younger consumer is really different than the ones we've been all clamoring for, the millennial, the Gen Z, the Gen I, whatever you want to call them. They're really different. They're kind of like the most evolved consumer that I can tell. They're super complex and really fluid. They know more about, I'm raising a few of them, and I'm amazed by them, how much more complex their understanding of the world is than any of us older people, are. And the things they just natively understand about the world is so surprising and wonderful. And I think we kind of try to put them in a box when we talk to them, when really what we should be doing is listening to them a little bit more. Because I think businesses and people can learn a lot they're like a higher order human to some degree. They're way more attuned to difference. They're growing up in the most diverse generation on the planet that has ever been. And so their food tastes, their political inclinations, their understanding of humans and how humans are more complicated than we like them to be. They're way less black and white than previous generations. And so that's one thing I'm noticing is companies are starting to sit down and go, ooh, we don't get this consumer because they're not like us. And we have a lot to learn so that we can be relevant to them. And so that's a watch out, I think, that I've been seeing recently is this. And the good news is I think some companies are actually starting to really not just try to, make a tidy little story about this consumer group, is to realize that this is a transformational generation. And we need to really listen to them because we could all learn a thing or two from them.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It has been incredible having you on today. I'm so grateful for everything you shared. I love that sort of duality of evolution and impact that is just so ingrained in who you are and how you operate, and the part about using voice as a person, but also as a brand. And so I couldn't have wanted or asked for anything more out of this incredible episode today. So thank you so much, Lisa.
Thank you for having me, and bravo to having these conversations with so many interesting people. I love listening to it, and thank you for inviting me to be part of it.
Yeah, thank you. And before we go, if people want to tap into the magic that you all are creating at goodDog, what's the best way for them to do that?
There is a page, because I cannot call it a website. She makes kids have no shoes. At wearegoodDog with 2Ds.com, and you can find a contact page on that on that site. So hopefully if you have needs, reach out.
All right, absolutely. And we'll stick it in the caption and the write-ups when we're releasing your episode. So thank you. Have an amazing day, Lisa.
Thank you. Bye, Shauna.